Hi, everyone. This is Mike again with another episode of Getting Everyone Moving, episode 33, that is, from Palms to Pines Parasports. And today I have Doug Dixon, who lives in Minnesota, and it's really cold. Oh my gosh. Hey, Doug.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, 40 below wind chill. It gets a little bit tough, but we're used to it up here, so no big deal.
All right. Well, let's get right into it. So, how did you get a start? How did you get started in adaptive sports?
Well, my son was born with spina bifida, and we were kind of just like most parents who came upon this. We didn't know really what to do, and there was a great program in Golden Valley Courage Center that we had heard about, but none of us really knew. And so there was a parent, Brian Eaton, and his wife Cindy, who worked with the Spina Bifida Association, and they said, and this sounds kind of crazy at this time, but they said, Courage Center is really far away. It's 20 miles away. Well, most people in adaptive sports know that. Some people are driving 100 miles to participate, but they said that's too far, but we want to kind of start our own thing. We don't really know anything about wheelchair basketball, but we heard about it, and Brian was a basketball player in high school, and he thought he could do it, and so I thought this is ridiculous, but I'll go see what it's about. And I was a parent. I was sitting on the sideline watching, and probably halfway through the first season, pretty soon I'm up helping with a couple drills. Next thing you know, I'm on the bench. Um, few years into it, Brian says, as the kids are getting older, he said, you seem to have a feel for this. Why don't you kind of take the program over? And this was a team we called the Minnesota Royals, which is no longer around. We were kind of a family team, and so we just kind of progressed with the kids. And when the oldest kids started to graduate, and we didn't have enough players, which was in about 2008, we I was invited by Mike Baller to have the rest of our team join Courage Center. And Mike Baller, he just welcomed us in, and to my surprise, because at the time I was kind of a self-taught coach, I didn't really know that much about it. I was trying to read things. I read, Lou Shaver's book. I read, anything. I was asking questions to everybody, but I was really coaching them like, just making it up as I went along. I knew how to coach kids, but I didn't know wheelchair basketball. So it was really a great stroke of luck for me. My son was a sophomore. We came over to Courage Center. Mike welcomed me in, and then he asked me to be an assistant to him. And so I was on the staff with him and Ian Lynch, who's a Paralympian. And I would sit on the bench, and I don't think I said a word for 2 years. All I wanted to do was listen. I asked Ian Lynch question after question. His ears are probably still ringing from all the questions I asked him. George Kiefner, who's now my assistant coach on the Timberwolves, taught me a ton. Mike showed me how to lead a team and run an organization, and it was such a great experience. So for 2 years, I was an assistant coach, and then Mike got another opportunity and had to move, and he and Sharon Van Winkle, who was running the program at Courage Center from an administration standpoint, got together, and they decided that I'd be a good one to take it over. And at that time, I was starting to feel more confident about coaching and learned a lot. So I inherited a real good team that had been to the national championship for the last 5 years, but we had a huge amount of kids graduate. So I started with a real young team, and which was great because we were all kind of learning together, and it was just a great experience. And that was in the 2011-2012 season, and so basically from '97 to now, probably what 24 years or so, I've been involved with
That's incredible. Wow. What are the kinds of disabilities that the team members have?
We get some cerebral palsy. We get some kids with uh, spinal cord injuries. We've gotten some kids that maybe one player I remember came to us at her junior year in high school, and she had been a great stand-up ball player and a real tall girl, and she was had not really heard about wheelchair basketball, was really interested from it being a kind of a school project kind of situation. And when she found out that because she had had multiple knee surgeries that prevented her from being able to play stand-up ball, that she was eligible to play. So she ended up joining the team, and within a year and a half or so, she got to play with us and learned a little bit about the game. But then she ended up going on and getting an opportunity to play at University of Illinois. So that was a great kind of a thing. So we get people from all levels. I'm not generally in favor of able-bodied players playing, but she wasn't. She was clearly in that window of a player who um, couldn't play her able-bodied sport anymore, and was able to play with us, and it was great for her. And I think Illinois was happy to have her, and it was just a great experience overall. But um, yeah, we get all sorts of people. We've had brittle bone disease. We've had different things. We've had a lot of different situations. Stroke. People would have a kid who had a stroke. One of my favorite players of all time was a stroke victim, and who has limited use of one of his hands, and just a great player. Was on our 2014 national championship team, and accident victims, all sorts.
So, I've found that just being able to have the opportunity to play, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, really, important. And of course, why shouldn't someone with a disability be able to play?
Right.
Um, how do you think we create more opportunities, not only for youth, but for adults with a disability, with different abilities, to get out and play?
That's a good question. It's a tricky one, especially nowadays, because I think a lot of doctors, for adults or somebody who maybe was injured a little later in life, it seems like the therapists and everything are encouraging them not to get into a chair. They don't want them to get into a chair. They think it's a step backwards. And I think if they knew what I've seen in the youth division, I've seen kids who are, pretty antisocial. They're sitting in the corner with their phone, not talking to anybody when they're sixth graders, fifth graders. And then after being a member of the team, working to make the better team, having having positive feedback, seeing that they can do these things. And by the end, not only are they not just sitting in the corner on their phone, not talking to anybody, but they're giving the speech at the banquet at the end of the year. They're recruiting new players. They're making, going on to lead the NWBA in some circumstances. Josie Aslickson was a player I coached, and now she was just named to the board. Rose Hollerman is an international, spokesman for the sport. And they all started as just little kids, who didn't they just wanted to have something to do on Saturday.
Yeah, I just interviewed Rose and Josie for this podcast, and really incredible. I mean, they were telling me they both grew up in Minnesota, I guess small
Mm-hmm.
towns, and didn't really know of each other, and now they're both on the Paralympic team.
Yeah, yeah. We have one of my players last year who's now playing at Alabama is also on. She's on the list of 16. So I've got three ladies who are in the running to be on the team, which is one of my proudest things. I'm just so proud of those guys. It was that's one of the best parts of coaching is seeing how uh, kids who may not have had these opportunities, once they're heard, once they're able to get out there and excel, they how much they can do. I mean, they exceed expectations so often. It's amazing. So it's just, yeah, it's been great. Those two in particular, but I've got many more stories that I could point out.
Yeah, it is terrific. It's a terrific thing. When you coach, Doug,
Mhm.
do you see the chair, or do you see just these athletes?
Definitely just see the athletes. It's funny that I bet you the chair became invisible for me probably within a year, the first year of playing, even with the little kids. I remember we didn't know anything. I mean, when my son was playing, and he ended up playing for the University of Missouri, and probably the biggest reason I'm involved is we didn't know to strap him in. I mean, he was 7 years old and he was flying out of his chair all the time, and we just didn't know. I mean, that's how naive we were. But even that being said, I just didn't notice the chair. It's just a function of the body, and it's still amazing to me that you know the way upper level players you know do so many things with their arms and hands, and without thinking. I mean, they're controlling stopping on a dime, all this while using the ball. And yeah, I mean, we can teach them basic techniques, but it's just something that over repetition just becomes so natural that, yeah, it's just pretty soon you don't even notice the chair.
Yeah. I see sports. I played, all my life, still
Mm-hmm.
play, of course, as much as I can. But I've learned a lot of, life lessons, whether it's how to work with people, whether it's leadership. What do you think your son has learned from, playing sport his whole life?
Well, Joe is the most amazing person to me. And my daughter is coaching as well. So they've both embraced this so much because we've seen how much good it can do. But Joe actually now doesn't want to play. He played in college. It was a grind. Um, he graduated in 4 years. He started and played all 4 years at Missouri. He was a really good player. But for him, it was more by the time he got to college, especially halfway through his college career, it was kind of a means to an end for him. He got a scholarship. He went there. He got a journalism degree. And now he's an editor for a magazine publishing company in Chicago, and he's independent. And he's just he appreciates and loves what wheelchair basketball did for him. He for All American, and the whole thing. And um, but he decided to move on, and I've had other players that play until I've got original Royals who are in 30 years old, and maybe they don't play anymore, but they still remember that time as being really good, and maybe that's encouraged them to stay in shape or whatever. Maybe they don't actually play anymore, but because they were an athlete in high school, they've tried to keep themselves in better shape. Yeah, Joe was definitely he's just amazing. I mean, he was I thought I still I'm such a nerd. I've still got stats from every game that he played, and I've got and I'll look back and I'll go, oh, I remember that game. That was really fun. And when I he was pretty much on the way down, and then I got a chance. Brandon McBean and Mike Waller gave me a call, and they said we've got, and this was in 2016, and they said we've got a developmental team that we want to send to the Kitakyushu Cup in Japan, and we'd like you to coach it. I said, well, that's an amazing honor, and I appreciate that. He said, but here we're going to do it a little different this year. What we'd like is half the team to be junior players and half the team to be adults. And oh, by the way, you have 48 hours to put your roster together. Oh, and by the way, they have to pay their own way. So I had to try to find 10 to 12 people who not only, would go. Oh, and then one more caveat is nobody who's being considered in the top 25 of the USA program. So I luckily I had a lot of friends and a lot of people, and I'd been watching a lot of college games. So I found my four junior players really right away, and I found a couple of adult players, and I found college players, but a lot of these players literally I'd never coached, obviously, but I'd even never seen play. So it was quite a challenge, and so we went over to Japan, never even had a practice. So I remember we were one day away from playing, and when we got there, we found out that Japan, Australia, and Great Britain were sending their U23 teams. So it wasn't just other developmental teams. So it was just amazing. But we were able to kind of put together simple, find common ground with everybody, put together a simple game plan. And we actually won 2 games that year against those teams, which was amazing. Our upset of Australia, I think, was still one of the most amazing moments of my life. It was with a lot of challenges. We were able to compete against those teams, but yeah, the reason I brought that up is that I really wanted Joe to go onto that trip, and he just said, "No, Dad, I'm moving on. I'm gonna maybe play some rec ball, but I don't." And I know the theme of this is to keep everybody moving, and I've tried to encourage him to do that. But he's kept himself in great shape. He just that 5:30 practice at Mizzou every day, and then going full class, and then in bed by 8:30 and doing it again for 4 years. He just kind of got a little burned out. So because of that, I've always been really encouraging of my junior players to take a summer off or do a different sport or do something like that, because I just don't want to see anybody get burned out on a sport, because I think wheelchair basketball players in particular, they like to just go 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then pretty soon they'll hit a wall, and then they don't love it. And I always think that players are just so much better if they're doing it because they love it, not because they feel like they have to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. When I spoke with Rose, she's in Spain now playing,
Hmm.
so it's all year round. Um, do you think that there will be an opportunity to develop a professional wheelchair basketball league in the US? And if so, what do you think it would take to actually get something going?
This is a sensitive subject for me, and my opinion on it might not be the most popular one. Unfortunately, I've seen so many wheelchair basketball games with the absolute best players in the world, Pat Anderson versus Steve Serio versus, and I've seen 10 people in the audience. And I just feel like it's such a shame. And I don't know if it's educating the public. I don't know what it is, but the reality is it's a real uphill battle to think about a professional league. But it seems like in Europe, and I'm not real aware of the details, but it seems like a lot of the teams in Europe are sponsored by a corporation, or they're the support comes from an outside source. It's not just relied on crowd size, and to build that, just to start with the company and get some excitement within the company to come and watch a team, and then hopefully that builds out a little bit to the community, and doing that might be the best way to do it. But I think without that initial huge
Yeah.
kind of support, have 10 people with unlimited resources virtually, or if 10 companies start a team, and then just to make sure that it's marketed correctly, and that it's I think it's amazing. And you've watched a lot of wheelchair basketball, I'm sure, and
Yeah.
what the top level players can do is unbelievable. But for some reason, if you don't have a relative in the audience, if you don't have a relative playing, a kid
Yeah.
or a friend playing, people watch it for about 5 minutes and they go, "Oh, okay, let's go get a hot dog." And I just think it's such a shame. I do, and I've seen it over and over again. I don't want it to be like that. But I think we also have to realize the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
Now, I've had friends who didn't know anybody, and they came the first time, and they were so amazed by it. They stayed all day. They watched every game. They asked questions, but honestly, that's not the norm. I think that most people I don't know what it is. It just is a hard game to see the subtleties, to see what a class one player does. They might say, "Oh, that class one player didn't do anything," but to somebody who knows the game, they're like, "That class one
Right.
player won the game for them."
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's just but I think teaching the public that is a definitely a challenge.
Well, so the Paralympics are coming up, of
Hmm.
course. The 2016 Paralympics. I mean, a lot of people watched, people attended.
Yep, yep.
How do we? I mean, especially in the U.S. I mean, how would you go about creating more awareness? Not only about wheelchair basketball, but about adaptive sports in general.
Again, I think it's a challenge. Um, a lot of what happened in London people were kind of encouraged to come. They got big groups of people to come, and it was probably the most amazing Paralympics ever. And then in Rio, it was really good too. But it kind of feels like the way to get it going is just to have, I don't know what the right word to say, but to really almost get people out there, no matter how you got to do it. If it's like,
Yeah.
corporate retreat, or or bring a whole wing of kids from the hospital in, and just get it exposed, just however we can do it. And the NBC covering it has helped. I don't know what their ratings were. I think for the most part it's people who know somebody already, but I think it's just a challenge. And I do think if people understood the game, saw the skill level, it would grow. But I think it's just getting over that hump, and I think that's been going on for a long time. I mean, I remember a big part of it is we can't get many televised games. I mean, Alabama's got they're televising their games with an announcer. Such a huge step. I mean, most games you watch these great athletes, watching Dylan Fishbach put up, 10 3-pointers against Whitewater, and I'm watching on a little Facebook live stream with no announcer. It doesn't do it justice. I mean, maybe if people saw it, if it was, if there was an announcer, going crazy and explaining what's going on, and replays and things like other sports get, it would be easier to sell for sure. We had our 2014 national championship game filmed with a couple of announcers. Brandon and Dave Ryder were the announcers, and I still have a link to that game. And to me, that was the best junior game I've ever been a part of. Of course, we won, and I'm highly biased, but Rose and Colin Evans were amazing in that game, and we had some amazing things that went on in that game. And honestly, I think if people would watch that game, even they would be amazed with what disabled athlete could do.
Yeah. So your son played under Ron Likens.
Yes.
The U.S. Men's coach.
Yep.
But there are only a handful of collegiate programs at this point. How do you think we can get more collegiate level programs going?
That's a good question. What they've done in Alabama, having a facility and everything, it generally seems to be take somebody who makes it a pet project. I know at Missouri, Senator Graham was a wheelchair player, and he was just mortified that he couldn't play for his beloved Mizzou, and so he had to go to Illinois. And once he got to the Senate, he figured out a way, and a fairly ingenious way. It's tied to the funding of the able-bodied stadium, the wheelchair team, and so he basically set that program up for years. I think it takes people like that in a community to say, I want this, we have to do it. Just the fact that most college programs are just club programs, I think they should be treated the same as the able-bodied programs. It's not a club program. These guys are putting in, 18 hours a day. I know at Edinburgh for a while they were considered a program. I know for a long time at SMSU, it was considered a collegiate program, not just a club program. So I think all of those things would help a lot. And they're little things at first, but I think that would help a lot. But it's just finding somebody who maybe it's somebody who, their kid benefited from the program, and they have the means to donate to a college to start a program, but have a grant set in place or something. Because it's almost always just money. They don't want to, the schools just don't want to commit resources to, it's mostly travel. I mean, the chairs and everything else are expensive, but the travel is usually the cost that gets everybody.
Yeah. How do you think, I mean, okay, so you have a son, spinal
Hmm.
bifida,
Hmm.
obviously lots of challenges. But how do you think we can go about creating a more inclusive society? What are some of the things that we all need to do so that, people feel welcome?
Yeah, it's a challenge, and I think as more people, um, I think for years, like when I was in high school, we didn't even see the disabled kids. They ate in a different room. I mean,
Mhm.
but now, like with my son, when he went to school, full inclusion, and he benefited so much from that, I believe. And sure, there's ignorance out there, and somebody would say something or mock him or something, but he dealt with that and he got on with it, and it's more like real life. And I'm hoping because of that, because of the dinosaurs like me are starting to go away, and kids that grew up with disabled kids are, you know, becoming, in charge of society. I'm hoping that it will be a more inclusive world. However, I hear time after time, my athletes, we have limited time we get them. We've practiced 2 times a week, so they want to go to a health club and shoot baskets in the winter because they can't play outside. I hear over and over again. I got there early. I had the hoop. I was shooting baskets, and all of a sudden, 8 able-bodied guys came through, and pretty soon they're wanting to play a game, and pretty soon they're just basically ignoring me, and they're just playing, and until I roll off to the side. And I can't imagine that there are still people that do that, and very rarely will they get invited. And I know it's difficult, to have wheelchairs and non-wheelchairs play, but it's not fair. He was there first. I mean, he should get to shoot, and they get basically pushed up, and it's happened. I've heard it happening a lot, and it still happens. So until there's more resources, I know in Minnesota they just built a place that mostly for disabled kids to be able to play. I know in Indiana they have places like Lakeshore and up in Turnstone and all these places that are places built for disabled people. I think that's going to make the opportunities rise up, and hopefully that adds to more inclusiveness. But it's a tough one. I mean, you got to change a lot of people's minds. It's mostly a lack of exposure. I don't think people mean to not include, but I think they just also I've had friends who have never dealt with a disabled person ever, and they just don't know. It's that whole thing where they bend down and they act like they're a 3-year-old, or something like that. It's just so offensive, and they just don't know any better.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. So
Yeah.
we're getting towards the end of our interview.
Okay.
What do you say to, maybe someone who has a disability who hasn't participated, to encourage them to, get involved?
I would, this one's easy for me. It will change your life. It will absolutely change your life. Um, Even if you don't think of yourself as a jock, maybe you like to sit on the couch and play video games. It will change your life. That look of a kid rolling into a gym at a basketball tournament and seeing 50 other kids exactly like him, and the look on their face, and they're going to compete on an even playing field. It it's it's probably why I'm still coaching. It's just an amazing thing to see. I mean, that first time, oh, there's all these kids. And then I'm a big proponent of having, we're lucky enough to have a big program. So we have a varsity team, and then we have a JV team, and we have a prep team. So I'm a big proponent of having that strong varsity team that you have to make. You have to learn to play basketball good enough to make that team. We want a place for everybody, but if you make that team, you have to learn, because our little prep kids look up and they go, "Oh, we want to be a Timberwolf someday." And then gives them that drive to go there. Because I think a lot of adaptive sports, it's great because it's super inclusive, but it's, oh, just show up and you can play. But real life, sometimes it is nice in a team sport to have to make that squad and to have to learn how to play well enough or to improve enough to make that squad. I think is a super key part of wheelchair basketball and team sports in general. And I don't think there are that many team sport opportunities for kids in wheelchairs. So I think um, that's another reason to say to a person who hasn't done it to say, hey, give it a shot. You'll see the idea of being on a team. And we try to have a kind atmosphere. We're firm, teach, make people accountable, but we try to have it be a kind thing and supportive. And even if you don't get that many minutes in a game, you're considered just as important as our star player. And I just think that experience is something that uh, you just need to go through at least give it a shot once.
Yeah. Well, Doug, thank you. This has been a terrific interview. Really
Oh,
appreciate it.
thank you. I
Thank
appreciate it. It was flattering for you to ask me. I appreciate it, and I like watching your adventures all over the world of supporting our cause. So
you. Thank you.
okay.